Reading from the book of Job, chapter 26, verses 5 to 14. The dead are in deep anguish, those beneath the waters and all that live in them. The realm of the dead is naked before God. Destruction lies uncovered. He spreads out the northern skies over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing. He wraps up the waters in his clouds. Yet the clouds do not burst under their weight. He covers the face of the full moon, spreading his clouds over it. He marks out the horizon on the face of the waters for a boundary between light and darkness. The pillars of the heavens quake, aghast at his rebuke. By his power he churned up the sea. By his wisdom he cut Rahab to pieces. By his breath the skies became fair. His hand pierced the gliding serpent. And these are but the outer fringe of his works. How faint the whisper we hear of him. Who then can understand the thunder of his power? A pilot once flew his small plane into a thunderstorm. As the plane jolted and jerked in the turbulence, the instruments became unreliable, and he lost his sense of direction. He said that in that moment, all he could do was trust God's unseen hand. All his years of training counted for nothing. There is no pride at 10,000 feet in a storm, he said, only prayer. The earth seemed to pause for a moment, and then came the thunder, deep, rolling, vibrating in his chest, reverberating through the ground. He became aware of his smallness and frailness. In that moment, the to-do lists, the dazzling arguments, and the certainties about life seemed to scatter like leaves in the wind. He encountered God's greatness in the storm. This is what the book of Job begins to awaken in us. It brings us face to face with a God who does not always explain himself, but whose power leaves no doubt of his greatness. In Job chapters 22 to 26, a long and painful argument between Job and his friends is nearing its end. Eliphaz launches a third round of false and cruel accusations against Job. He paints Job's life as a catalogue of wickedness, as if Job had spent his years crushing the poor, oppressing the needy, and mocking God. Not even Satan accused Job of such things. Ironically, God himself had declared Job to be blameless and upright, a man who fears God and turns away from evil. But Eliphaz and the others speak with reckless certainty. Their entire worldview is built on the black and white idea that good people prosper and bad people suffer. So if Job is suffering, he must be guilty. Their narrow and rigid understanding of God is built on this transactional theology. And because they believe they are defending God's honor, they speak with crude boldness, but not with compassion. They do not listen. They do not weep with Job. They are not open to considering Job's view of things as possibly more correct than theirs. Job, exhausted and misunderstood, doesn't waste much time arguing with Eliphaz this time. As always, he turns to God, longing to be able to plead his case directly before him without fear. He is assured that the Almighty knows his heart, his integrity, his grief. Yet, he is anguished by the way of the world, injustice, oppression, and violence without any obvious consequences to the sinners. He wonders at not seeing God's justice in the presence of the prosperous wicked. Bildad's final speech reveals nothing new. His misplaced confidence in his insight and correct theology makes him pompous and self-righteous. He speaks as though he understands the mysteries of God, as though he holds the map to divine justice. But his arguments reveal not insight, but ignorance. And then Job speaks. Chapter 26 is his response that cuts through the shallow theology of his friends. He dismisses their help. How have you helped the powerless? How have you saved the arm that is feeble? What advice you have offered to one without wisdom, and what great insight you have displayed. Chapter 26, verse 2 and 3. His point is clear. If his friends truly knew God as they claimed, they would speak revealing the character of God. Instead, their words bring no healing, no clarity, no humility. They speak from ignorance, not from the Spirit of God. Then Job lifts his eyes from his pain and his accusers to remind himself of the majesty of God. In vivid imagery, he describes the hidden wonders of creation. The mystery is known fully only to God. He speaks of the dead realm, which is Sheol, laid bare before him. He describes the earth suspended over nothing, the clouds heavy with water, yet their edges miraculously tucked under the sea. He speaks of the boundaries of the seas, the glory of the heavens, the hush that falls upon the sea when God speaks, and the constellations he formed. What Job is describing here is both scientific truth and divine revelation. Long before Newton discovered gravity, Job knew that the earth hung on nothing. He speaks of meteorology, astronomy, oceanography, truths that would take centuries for humanity to uncover. And yet, Job says, these are but the outer fringe of his works. These are the whispers of God's power. How faint the whisper we hear of him. Who then can understand the thunder of his power? 26 verse 14. If this is just the edge of God's works, if these visible wonders are but a whisper of his power, how much greater is his fullness? How much louder is the thunder of his power? And this perhaps is the turning point in Job's heart. He begins to glimpse that God is not just a puzzle to be solved, not just a judge to be appeased, but a mystery to be worshipped. He realizes that his understanding of God is limited, but that doesn't make God less real, only more majestic. And then we come to the New Testament, where the thunder of God's power is revealed not in storms or stars, but in a cross. Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3 says of Christ, he is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. He upholds the universe by the word of his power. In Jesus Christ, the whisper became thunder. The invisible was seen through the visible image. The word took on flesh. And through the apparent weakness of the cross, God's power was ultimately manifested to the salvation of those who wait for him. His power raised Jesus from the dead and gave us forgiveness and new life. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, for the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. We preach Christ crucified, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. Chapter 1, verse 25. Job asked, who then can understand the thunder of his power? But now we know that this thunder has a name, and his name is Jesus. Let us learn from Job's friends not to speak of God as if we fully understand him. We must approach his mysteries with humility, not with shallow certainty. We may not understand why suffering comes, but we know that in Jesus Christ, God has drawn near to us. We may not grasp the vastness of his purposes, but we can trust the one who holds it all together. And when we preach Christ, we are proclaiming not mere ideas, but God's power unto salvation. As Jeremiah 9:23 and 24 reminds us, let not the wise boast in their wisdom, or the strong boast in their strength, or the rich boast in their riches. But let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me, that I am the Lord who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. for in these I delight. Let us boast forever be, not in how much we know, but in the one who knows us fully. Let us worship not a God we can control, but the God whose thunder still humbles and saves. God bless.